This is a pretty deep, meaningful discussion today I'm having with Vaughan. But look, we've got an election coming up in October. But what really confronts me, and I went to my mate about this, Vaughan, and to have a talk, and I think we should do a video on it. What confronts me is this. People are disillusioned with politics. They've had a gutful. People, not only in New Zealand, around the globe, they're actually just really, really hold politicians in contempt. They feel like they've been deprived of any sincerity, and what's being promised hasn't been coming through. This really, really is upsetting a lot of people, and the whole of the fundamentals of democracy. People are going to say, something's wrong here. It's not working. I'm not going to be a part of it, so I'm not voting. And that's what's going to happen in October. We may get less than 30%. We may get 30%. That's not good enough. So I'd like to turn this over to Vaughan, who's very thoughtful and a person that I trust to have a reasonable opinion about it. Whether I agree with him or not, well, that's up to all of us. Hey, Vaughan, what's your thoughts?
Well, Friday and a deep and meaningful discussion. Gee, I'm privileged that you're calling me out to do that. Quite potentially the most intellectually shallow person on LinkedIn. However,
No.
Something is there's some turbulence in your puku, in your belly, and there's some gut feel telling you that this doesn't feel right. More questions than answers, and isn't that always the way? And look, Max, firstly, kia ora, bro. Good to see you. So, okay, democracy. It's been around for around 25 centuries or so. And, that's basically countries governed by the governments elected by the people. So to put that into context, Max, we know what democracy is not. It's not North Korea. It's not Syria. It's not Saudi Arabia, one party or monarchy state. So, Max, therefore, we are privileged to be living in one of the most democratically and free countries in the world, along with Norway, Sweden, Canada. We're the unicorns of democracy, yet we're asking questions. What we've taken for granted is that those traits of democracy where there's one rule of law and no one's above it. There's freedom of expression, without censorship or discrimination. There's equality and inclusion, and we're all treated equally, race, gender, religion, no matter what. Transparency and accountability. Our government officials are called out for their actions. So with that in mind, Max, are those traits really still here today, or have they become an illusion? That's what, I'm asking, bro. What do you think about that?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think we had Jacinda and a lot of her rulings she put in place. We felt like we were constrained, imprisoned, all sorts of things. And she took the action that she felt was right for the nation, right or wrong. And the other factor is we've been also through co-governance with, I'm talking co-governance where we've got two parties in power. And that means compromise. So every decision thereafter is compromised between the two parties. One wants to be influential, the other one wants to be more influential. And we get really secondhand, slimy down decisions. And look, that doesn't fit with us. We've had minority parties govern this country, Winston Peters, where he's had the balance of power because it doesn't work. Now, that's in New Zealand, but worldwide, think about it, folks. There's been riots all over the world. Look at the United States and upside down that became. Look at Britain, with the way they went to into the European market, and the way they had a wild-looking leader, and so did the United States have a crazy-looking leader. But were they crazy, or were they actually just trying to do the right thing? We're having more and more leaders trying to run the country like a dictatorship. And are we liking that, or are we disliking it? Because the dictatorships, Vaughan, I think, are actually having a rest. Is that people seem to be so discontented. We're hearing Russia is, but I think that may be a minority group we're hearing because the media likes to hear it.
Yeah, and Max, what you've touched on there, because I mentioned, the unicorns of democracy. New Zealand is right up there. We're at the top of the pile when it comes to free countries. Yet you look at the other countries I mentioned, like Norway, Sweden, Canada. People are grumpy. So if there was a world unhappiness or grumpiness meter about how things are at, we seem to be all in a bit of a funk. Max, it was Albert Einstein that said, to not think in evolutionary terms is to not think at all. And in that regard, I believe democracy has got into a bit of a rut where it hasn't evolved at the same rate that society has evolved, particularly these past couple of decades. You know, be it pronouns, cancel culture, climate change, Indigenous rights, artificial intelligence. You look at what's happened in our world around us from the time that you and I first voted when we were 18. So comparatively, our society's taken this bloody quantum leap, while democracy looks like it actually belongs in a rest home. And so, you know, there's this gap between, if democracy was a business and it was audited, you know, your business was democracy and your customers are the voters, there's a big capability gap between what's out there and what's in here. So I'll close with this, Max, because I'm having a little bit of ranty-tanty as usual. You know, while I don't think it's quite bedtime for democracy, I do think there's a disconnect there that we need to not ignore. Democracy's been challenged, and you know who's challenging it? Our young. You can see the big disconnect. They're looking at us, you, me, our politicians. They're not inspired, you know. And for democracy to work, you need inspiration, you need trust, belief. You need to know that your destiny is in good hands. And so, you know, for today, bro, that's my lot.
Yeah. And Vaughan, I'm just going to quote you here a little bit, because you told me yesterday we were talking about this, and you said that the young are really disillusioned with us, and that's a fact. But there is what's happened with democracy that hasn't kept up with the pace of change that our society's gone through. And that's really social media and the ability to communicate openly and freely. But we're getting bombarded with information, all sorts of facts. We're getting all sorts of misinformation as well.
That's right.
We have to decipher that, work out what's best. But do you know what people do? They just switch off. Yeah. But look, getting back to the old question, and folks, I really love to know your opinions about this, because is there an alternative to democracy we should actually consider? But take ourselves back to wartime. In the Second World War, Churchill made a name for himself as a fantastic leader. But listen to his quote. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried. And I sum it up there. Now, is there something, he's a smart man. Now, is there something better than democracy, folks? And is it upsetting you as well? Because a lot of Kiwis are not going to vote this election, and that's a shame. Why? They've lost confidence.
To be continued, Max.